storage in that article.
It went to the wastewater treatment plant, and it had been there for years, and I checked today and it's gone.
Okay.
When they did that expansion, it probably was kind of in the way.
Yeah.
Got moved out.
Well, there was once I was around, I said I would be really surprised if it was still around.
I think that it probably would have rotted to the point that it wasn't worth using, because it was just sitting on the ground.
Yeah.
So, and it was old in the beginning.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming. Today is the April 10th, 2023 meeting for the Riverfront Advisory Committee. Is there any public comment?
I just want to thank whomever was responsible for getting Shanta Park and the Riverwalk cleaned up and trimmed back and everything. It looks really nice.
Excellent. Thank you. So let's start with approval of the minutes from last meeting. Just skimming through, I think they look fine with the amendment being changing Betsy's name.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any comments, or minutes fine to approve as suggested, amended?
I think I get more credit than I deserve.
And I have to abstain because I wasn't here.
Always accept the credit. All right, so I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
I'll second.
Nice. All in favor? And 2 abstention. Nice. Just skimming through the minutes from last week, I'll make, I guess, a couple comments. So I had mentioned the Moonlight Brook testing with Dr. Jones from UNH. There hasn't been any solid action on that item yet. We'll probably be doing potentially something with them in a week or two. I think we're going to walk some of the watershed area. So that hasn't actually happened yet. But hopefully come the next meeting, there might be a potential update to report on that front. We had also talked about funding at the last meeting, and Dale, this might be the sheet that Bart just dropped for us, might be kind of the exact outcome of that. But it's sort of at least a summation of the different grants that the town's targeting for items related to, Moonlight Brook and or Shanta Park, primarily the Moonlight Brook work. So it's great to see that summation. Really the first domino to fall is probably the Coastal Resilience Grant, which the application is due on the 26th, and then the Clean Water SRF work, which is due on June 1st. So I'm not sure there's any immediate action item for us or thing that we have to necessarily talk about. Seems like Bart and Lindsay are generally on top of that from the town's perspective, but maybe an item of discussion at the next meeting, depending on what, if any, input they need. So if nobody has any specific questions or discussion points, we can kind of keep this in the back pocket and maybe talk about it more next month.
Okay.
And then, so outside of that, I think this planning document, I guess, for lack of a better term, was something that Joe, Dale, and I had talked about at the last meeting. And I think some of that was just, we've talked about quite a few things over the course of this committee's life. So let's, I guess, bring it all together somewhat. So by no means is this list comprehensive. This is mostly just kind of me flipping through my notes over the course of this committee and just kind of trying to group it into sections of like topics that we've discussed.
I think it's a great help.
And some of what we've
I was
learned.
going to say it's really helpful to me as a newcomer.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
I think some of it too is also just I'd like to have some discussion on it, especially because I'm sure all of us know more than just what came out of my notes as I'm like doing this at night. And I'm very tired of my young kids. Yeah. So like there's more to be added to this. So let's have a little discussion, maybe add some now, make some notes to add stuff later. But the other thing that I kept kind of coming back to as I was doing this is almost figuring out what interests people from this, or like what specific parts certain individuals are most interested in, and then maybe kind of having that be like a little bit of a focus area for them for kind of
By the,
advancing some individual things. So like one item for me is like a personal example would be the whole concept of like the Shanda Park maintenance stuff, and I'm glad to hear that was a thing that happened recently. But I know that's come up a few times of the overlap of Shanda Park between Conservation Commission and Public Works and Rec Department and town staff and this committee, and who owns and is responsible for it and whatever. I think
so who
That's
did the
something
recent
that's
work that Betsy's talking about? Was that the town? or-
short answer, I would guess it's the town.
Yeah, it was Karen Bloom.
Okay.
She does it every spring.
So having, and I know the town's in the process of updating the master plan, there's gonna be a whole chapter on parks. And like, I'm sure Shanda Park will play a function in that, but that's something I would like to work with on the town side of working with the players and helping to see if can provide any input of how to leverage everyone's skills and capabilities and bandwidth or whatever, and see if there's almost like a better, more established maintenance plan schedule for like Shanda Park. So like that's something that I would use as a personal example, especially being on the Conservation Commission too, that I think would be advantageous for me to play a role in. So does everyone have to be jazzed about every topic? No. But that's kind of where, I don't know, I'm happy to also stop talking and just list as a little bit of like feedback, but just what specifically are people somewhat interested in and would like to explore a little bit further.
I'll take two. I'd like to look in, expanding the river walk down, down towards the, transfers to compensation levy, down there. And I don't know if anybody has actually followed up with, Greg or whatever about potentially putting a restroom, hooking a restroom onto the compensation down here. Is anybody?
No, we haven't, and I know like
Creighton Park, or
Crane Street, yeah, Crane Street. I know that's something like every year Conservation Commission we talk about the public restrooms for like arts in the park or whatever. And I know when Amy came here last, she was like, well, maybe
Let me follow up with
I'd
Greg.
support
to
a
see
permanent restroom if it
it's even
happens.
feasible, and
Yeah.
I would assume it's feasible. There's a pumping station here, right, and they get water.
Well, that area is fenced off currently. There's some disagreement as to whether it is required to be. Some of the engineers have said no, it's a local consideration to fence them off. There's a concern with the Homeland Security protecting public water supply, but that's water supply, not wastewater. And that is part of the Homeland Security, but that's drinking water.
Yeah.
Terrorists really don't want much of our wastewater. But there is a valid concern for sort of water supply. But there are other locations, though. The main goes right through Shanda Park, below grade, I believe. I'm pretty confident it goes right through there, as does domestic water supply, because there's a fire hydrant there. So both are there, and that's the infrastructure needed, really. So anywhere near that is doable. I mean, we build houses with it just out in the street, so you can have a fairly small line leading to a small structure.
You know, I'll follow up with Greg and Steve and say, you know, hey, we would
Yeah.
like to look at, I would think just like adding a room onto the existing building there might, and, you know, if they have to fence off behind that or something, you know, to keep us separate, I'm sure that we could work something out that way.
The only other piece of that is people would have to traverse over a piece of private property
That's,
to get there.
that's the second part of the walkway there, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And I think, yeah, just that little bit of the private land is always what's kind of stymied Riverwalk to
Yeah,
the south.
exactly. I think that talking to that property owner and trying to figure out something would be a huge step in the right direction.
Would it be open year-round, accessible year-round?
Those are always local options. I mean, Old Orchard Beach, theirs is open year-round. You can
Yeah.
go there in the middle of winter.
I would say that it shouldn't be open year-round, that when
Yeah.
they're doing things in the park and whatever.
My thinking is kind of like, somebody said to me, why buy a pickup truck to run to the transfer station 2 or 3 times a year? When you clean up in the spring and when you clean up in the fall, when you could rent a truck for those 2 days and not have the long-term expense of having a pickup truck. Is this similar? Are we going into a big expense to put in a permanent facility when we could rent a porta potty for the season that we need?
They don't like the porta potties, that's the issue.
I mean, in terms of, we probably ought to look at the overall cost, though. I mean, to say, because they don't like the porta potty, and we're spending 5 times as much to build something, is that being responsible about expensive expensive
Well,
resources?
well, the other part of that is when I look and visit places with public parks and stuff, that you see it a lot of times, they're hard to protect from vandalism if they're not used a lot. So it seems like in a lot of cases, unless they're used pretty heavily, they end up being locked. And so,
Well, I think the first thing is it feasible? Okay, then obviously then the second part is, okay,
Yeah.
what's the cost?
well, I think it's not impossible, it's just how much does it cost? And is that,
Yeah, and I know something that happened last year too, or there was questions about it got late in the season when they were trying to get the portable facilities for arts in the park, and there was talk about getting like a handicap accessible unit or whatever, and like basically they couldn't get one. So it became sort of a question of like accessibility or even trying to offer these facilities on a part-time basis, but we can't offer them for everyone. So I know Amy had said that last time she was here would support it if it seemed to make sense. But I know we talk about this once a year at Concom for some reason or another of just getting the permission and where it's gonna go and all that sort of business.
they put a restroom out by the splash pad and all of that.
Yep.
That got done.
And it worked really well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's well appreciated, but, they have,
As a
Regular-
parent of small children, it's well appreciated.
Yeah.
a lot, in the downtown, I think it's almost the question about whether you have a restroom there is more, what are the restrooms available in the downtown for people that are walking through the downtown without going into a restaurant, try to beg your way into a,
There are public restrooms in the mill buildings. I've used them.
yeah. And are they,
They're not truly public, but every commercial entity is required to have a restroom by the plumbing code. But they're not truly public, they're for their customers supposedly, but of course, you
Right.
walk in the
What
back
about the
door.
one that's
The
in the
Chinburg,
basement?
you talking about the Chinburg building
Down below,
behind the restaurant?
below the restaurant.
Yeah, they're not truly public, they're privately owned, but they don't have to allow the public to use them unless they're a customer.
right, but they don't attempt to stop anybody.
Yeah,
No,
'cause
they
it's
don't,
down,
no.
yeah, because
No,
it's a whole floor down below the
It's a
restaurant.
nuance, I
yeah.
guess, because, we all
There's
use
nobody-
them.
Well, I mean, like, for example, if people were trying to, if you don't know there's a restroom there and you all of a sudden put a sign up in Shanda Park saying, restroom over there,
Yeah,
they might take
Yeah,
exception
right.
at that point.
Yeah.
And I suspect they would.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that ultimately it's not, it has to make sense, but I think it's worth pulling the thread.
At this point, it's just, is it feasible?
Yeah,
And then,
it's-
and you take it from there.
feasible,
worth
then a
the-
cost
Yeah.
analysis of it, yeah.
Right, and there's a lot of options. Newington just examined this as well in one of their parks, and they've got a historic district with a couple of historic buildings, and they wanted to find out if if you could buy your own porta potty, which you can, and just contract somebody, because they leave them there for a whole summer at a time. They also make prefab outhouses, which you pump out. But in the end, they ended up going back to, let's just rent one. They looked at a lot of options and then they decided to just keep on renting it, because they just didn't want to spend any money, is really what it came down to. But they did examine the options and thought about it a little bit. They weren't even going to connect it to a wastewater system. It would be just something with a holding tank. Oh, they were actually examining whether or not to open up a building, a public building that had bathrooms in it, and they decided they really didn't want to do that either.
Another option would be maybe porta potties, but, you know, where they locate it right now, they put it like right at the end of the parking lot there. It's kind of like a, I don't know, it's not, if they could maybe move the porta potties down by the Crichton Street building itself and somehow, you know,
Yep.
allow access into that, that would be better too.
Yeah, and they can create enclosures to dress them up a little bit too, make them a little bit more.
And you know, I can't see them being there all winter long. I would think really just, you open them up in the summertime when they're having the Arts in the Park type of programs and whatever.
And I'm thinking, if we're only using it during the Arts in the Park, we're not during the winter, because, I mean, there are people who are down there walking even now, obviously. But if it's not something that would be used in the winter, then looking at a porta potty seems to be, you know, a valuable thing to look at. If we're just saying, yeah, maybe 2/3 of the year, half the year we'd be using it, and the other half we wouldn't.
Yeah, so it still would be good to keep awareness of it. Do we have a good place for the porta potty to be sized now?
Yeah, if we don't have place.
So at a minimum, you know, you
A
can,
better place for it.
a better place for
Yeah.
it, those kind of things. And
Well, if you don't mind, I'll follow up with Sean and Steve. Also, I'll follow up with Steve too on if they can maybe start talking about getting an easement or whatever through, Cheney owns that property?
Lane Genie owns that one last rental unit.
So,
And,
have you had conversations with them in the past, Mike?
Not directly. The person who lives there currently is a friend of mine, and he said that Lane's not very interested, but that's coming third party. It's not direct conversation with Lane. And with any real estate thing is negotiating power. I mean,
and she's Walter's sister or something? Is she related?
it's Walter's son.
Well,
Walter
I thought it
Walter
was
Cheney, Senior's son.
Lane is the one that's been redeveloping the Selectwood building.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, I thought Lynn was the lady. Oh, Lynn's a guy?
Lane, it's Lane,
Lane.
L-A-N-E.
Jeez, I need glasses and ears.
I think there
Lane.
was a Lynn Cheney. I'm trying to think of, but she's married now. Smith is his last name now.
Okay, Lane Cheney is the owner of the property there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that gets into the question of, for some of these areas, you know, where we've had, you know, in the 2 years plus that I've been on this committee, we've had a lot of conversations about, could we extend the Riverwalk that way, and talked about the Lane Cheney. And I think we need to kind of have an idea. It seems like before we get more public input on it, is there anything further we can do on each of these to start to further develop what that means to go in either direction? You know, the Riverwalk, I mean, there is a Riverwalk now that heads in front of the mill buildings and up, you know, Rivermore and et cetera, up that way. But I think it needs some maintenance work done on it, and there has to be some kind of agreement about what that could mean. And I think the idea of having a good walkway along those areas that's maintained and the ability, that's attractive either way. So I don't know what's the best way to start to have some engagement on it so that we can.
Well, moving south, it's probably that initial conversation.
Yeah,
Is this on the table?
Let's get the easement and then talk about the porta potties and then we can, start working on, is it even feasible, how far down can you go? I mean, I know there's already talk about going all the way down to behind the pumping station there.
Well, yeah, and that's something that I would highly recommend anybody, take a walk up Colonial Drive, turns to dirt, it's an old Class 6 road, and it's actually really nice, and everything on the water side of that dirt portion is town-owned, they're woods, it's about 10-acre parcel that's, before you get to the actual wastewater treatment plant, and it goes, well, essentially right down to the water, but there is, Creighton Street goes right into the pumping station. But that's a beautiful little chunk of woods.
It's already a walkway there?
Well, there's,
Little path?
if you.
Paths, right?
Yeah, it's an old Class 6 road, it's a dirt path, it's a walking path right now. And it's something actually I believe should be, signed so people know it's a public access. It's a great way for pedestrians and,
The Conservation Commission doesn't really do anything with that at this point?
I don't think it's our property, or we have any easement stake in it, at least not that I'm aware of.
It may be just town property.
it's just
now.
town property, yeah. There's
Is that where
maybe-
your photos were from today?
Well, I walked it today, but those
Yeah.
photos were, I did go down to the, and I went down to the other boat launch down, downstream of the wastewater treatment plant.
Gotcha.
But
It's
yeah.
almost more, it has, when you're walking around it, I mean, it's been years since I did that walk, but it felt, yeah, it gives you a similar kind of feeling when you're smaller, but it feels like you're over at Heron Point.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
You know, it's woods.
It's amazing
And
that
you
there's
walk
that,
through there, you say, oh, this is so close to downtown, how does this come to be, you know, is what you're.
it's so close to downtown and it's so close to, the water, and it's really woods that nobody seems to really realize is public land.
I didn't know, I've been here 40 years, I didn't know you can go down there.
It's beautiful. It's really nice. So there are kids making forts and stuff down there. So some people know that you can play in there.
You learn something new every day. What is it, 7 acres?
I think it's a little bit more, maybe. Yeah, maybe 8 or 9.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like a lot of other things. Before you were going to encourage more people to go out there, you gotta kind of have a plan as to what, you know, what Public Works is comfortable with, and, you know, and.
Yeah. Well, it's really what the council's comfortable because, you know, the Public Works, they report to the council.
Right.
So it's really the council's call, what gets done. You know, Public Works may have a desire and some needs, and they can express them, but it's really the council gets to decide how to use the public lands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and again, I think not to get, I think it's, how do you relate that to the conversation about the river walk and down towards?
Well, I think for this board, I think it's important to see it and realize how nice it is and say, wow, maybe that is important to connect how valuable is that little easement on this piece of land? Because if it's a big chunk of land that's beautiful, that easement might be more valuable to us.
Yeah. Well, and you know, there's a lot of ways of looking at it. If you're looking, if you had the easement, it's worth at least being reminded of that existence of that land, because if you're saying, well, it would be nice to have a nice walk that you could connect to being downtown and use the area, there's a reminder that, you know, maybe just using some paths over there might be a whole lot less costly than putting a bridge across the Lamprey to get to Heron Point.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely almost nothing
Right.
comparatively, yeah.
Right, so I think it would be a good thing to kind of have, you know, and I'm not sure, but if I would, you know, one of us or two of us, you know, as we divide it up, you know, I'd be willing to have a conversation with somebody to see if I could talk and see, is this something we should be, if we're going to talk more broadly, I mean, we've got a good time for public input coming up with, you know, with the charrette.
Yeah, now until the fall is the time to.
To sort of
Discuss
plan
this.
out what the limits of that might
Minor
be,
items.
because there's a lot of different ways for putting, you know, more accessibly into the downtown. Under any circumstance, though, I think the part that would be used the most and be of most interest to people would be that main Riverwalk area that exists down there. So you kind of, we need to find a way to kind of advance things, I think.
Makes sense to me.
We gotta,
Well, I will talk with Steve about, have him get going on talking to Cheney about an easement, as step number one, and then, I think maybe we should have the Conservation Commission take a look at that. If we can get that easement, I think that's, Conservation Commission should maybe step in next and, take that. Sounds like an easy thing to do rather than, easier than Heron Point, right?
well, definitely easier than trying to do the bridge at this point. I mean, easier, much less maintenance, much less, and I think I wouldn't take off. I think I'm starting to think more and more in terms of what do we want to talk to the town about to kind of, it doesn't do much good to give them, here's 100 things that might be possible. We've got to kind of figure out what are the things that really need to be solved, and I think we spent a lot of time talking about that. Moonlight Brook, improving the boat landing, and then what's the next level of aspiration after that is, improving the usability of a walking path that already exists down there in the downtown, and potentially expanding it in the direction of the sewer plant and all of that. And then, to me, those feels like that's quite a chunk of work right there. And then after get to that point, then you start talking about, well, then there are other public lands that are available in that immediate area.
I think that's an easy, doable one versus, the Moonlight Brook and, the Heron Point. Those are, nice things that we'd like to do, but.
Yeah, I would see it differently than that, Joe. I think the Moonlight Brook is.
It has to be done.
You're right. That's not just a recreation thing. It's just like fixing the foundation before you build the
Yeah.
house.
Yep.
I think
Infrastructure needed at this point.
it's an infrastructure, and it all ties into MS4 and a lot of clean water and a lot of that thing. So, in some sense, that kind of is something that we know is going on in parallel, and we've got an engineer now that's kind of on it, and I feel like that, once we get a little bit further on and understand how that's going to be, but I think we're going to end up with some kind of a bridge structure there, and it's a matter of how wide, and at that point, it will lead us back to, is it even feasible to try to do something to get access down to that, and I think the questions Molly might be asking us is with Steve's support trying to solve the questions of creating an extension down that way to have the walk run down that way. I mean, do we really understand whether people working within the administration see this as a big problem or relatively easy to do to have a walking area there down there? I don't know how Sean feels about that, and it's not necessarily his decision, but it's.
Well, be outside of his fenced area. Anything really would be, he's got the whole wastewater treatment plant fenced in, and all the land that we're talking about is outside of that.
So I think maybe is the next step for us to have our next meeting there, so
I
we.
was just thinking the same thing.
Well,
So we can say it, because I don't know the area.
or we could have a site walk or an informal, I'd be glad to
Yeah.
walk anybody down there. If we'd have to be very careful about us having a non-meeting. We couldn't really go all at once unless we scheduled it and made it a public
Yeah,
notice
have
that
to
we're having a site walk.
Publicly post it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if less than a quorum go at a time, then, or individually is fine.
Yeah.
But if there's a quorum, I think we have to do whole
Well,
public
maybe we could
notice.
do, I think it would be, I've been down there for the meetings when we were having the living shorelines when you were there, but I've
Yeah.
never walked it with you.
If it's publicly noticed, it's no problem having a site site tour,
Yeah.
which the planning board does that a lot, and ZBAs will do that, and,
We got times in the evenings now to do.
yeah, until like 8:30 or something.
No, it's not dark at 4 o'clock.
Yeah,
It's helpful.
yeah, and I'd be, and there's actually good parking all the way up at the, Public Works facility, because that road connects all the way to Young's Lane. So you can park at Public Works and just walk in that direction, and it's really a pleasant walk.
Yeah, I think it would make a lot of sense to try to do, rather than wait till the next meeting, try
Yeah.
to do that within the next couple of weeks maybe, even if everybody's got time to do it.
We could set up it would be a site walk, I guess, and just have Wendy notice a site walk on a
Yeah,
date.
we could, and we can
And
talk about.
That would be helpful to me, because I don't know that I would necessarily have the background knowledge to ask the questions to get the answers I need, because I don't know the questions to ask.
Yeah.
But if all of you are there, I'm sure that there'll be lots of questions that would be informative to me that I wouldn't know to ask.
Yeah, we can talk scheduling after this and get something posted to do that, because it seems advantageous. So I'm kind of flipping aimlessly through here, not finding it, and didn't actually put it in this document. But every now and then I like to go back to like what actually our charter or like overwhelming mission statement is, because sometimes I feel like I forget. But the general takeaway is just to improve access and connectivity of the waterfront to the residents. So,
To make recommendations to the town
yeah,
council.
it's pretty broad. And if this is, like you said, you know, somewhat more tangible effort to, you know, connect Shanda Park and downtown and the Riverwalk that does exist with potentially other town-owned land, then why not?
It certainly is the low-hanging fruit, and of you talking about, this is
It
an
is.
easy one, and, you know, in planning, they talk about a 5, 10, and 20-year plan, and 20 years is kind of a dream.
Yeah.
But the 5 and 10, those are more obtainable. The
Yeah.
5 is what can
Right,
we
right.
get quick?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's clear that, I mean, it's a widely, Shanda Park is just this little thing that's, you know, a little piece of land that's really widely used and has a lot going on there. And you're trying to expand it somewhat. I mean, if we had access down towards the sewer plant, that would be.
I would love to make a pipe or something, I don't know, from Moonlight Brook out to the river or whatever, and cover that over and basically double the size of Shanda Park. And that would be something I would like to do. I don't know how thrilled people would be about that, but.
And I think DS usually wants to daylight all streams, but, like
When you
bridges
say
would do
daylight all
something.
streams, what I saw that
But
one.
opening it up so that the sunlight can hit.
Oh, okay.
But
Not enclosing it.
Which is the opposite of
putting it
docking.
right-
As we
Yeah,
talk
okay.
about our living shoreline, this sort of moves,
But-
that would be a move in the opposite direction. I
Well,
would
but
say.
it, I mean, I've got pictures, I can,
But
you know,
yeah,
see what I'm talking about.
I remember Dory Wiggin, I think it was, who was a woman who worked for DES, and she allowed like a boardwalk, but it had to have slats a certain width to allow sunlight through. But that was just like a boardwalk that somebody wanted, and they should, that way the sun could hit, and it's for eelgrass.
Have they already covered over part of Moonlight Brook? You know, right now there's the walkway that goes from Shanda down to the boat launch, right?
Yeah, and,
Is that all, that's not natural, right? That's stuff that.
well,
is done?
the old Moonlight Brook goes all the way up Exeter Road, and it's all culverted for the most part. So it's all piped.
So, let me just.
Is this up behind high school, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it starts
Until, like,
behind the high
Maple-
school, and then it
Maple
goes
Street.
under the train tracks, behind
Yep.
the gas station,
Under the gas
Newmarket.
station or something, or over the gas station?
Yeah, yeah,
So,
When overflows?
yeah, so it goes up here.
this part right here is the parking lot. Isn't that all, that's man?
Yeah, that's man-made, that was done just like 20 or 30 years ago.
All I'm saying is we extend the pipe or whatever out here and cover
Yeah.
this part, and then also cover this part.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think DES would permit that. They wouldn't allow for that,
Why not?
'cause, well, I don't know, I'm not a
For the
wetlands
health-
guy,
For the
but,
health of the
Basically,
water,
yeah.
that's why they call it sunlighting.
Yeah, basically
It's the health of the
infilling
water.
open water.
I agree with the concept of increasing the size of this park wholeheartedly. And maybe there could be some sort of structure that sunlight would go through that, but, you know, like a metal grate or something like that. But, you know, it's just, tough. But I think we also should try and,
I apologize that you can't see.
you know, the other thing I actually just want to mention is, do we want to think about reopening the public hearing if 2 more people joined? I don't know if they might have something to say.
That is true.
And it would be, they may not, I don't know.
Technically, we start every meeting with public comment period. So if there was specific comment that you'd like to make, by all means, you're welcome to do so now. If you're just wanting to listen.
Thanked for the cleaning up of Shanty Park.
Okay, we live at Rivermore Landing, love it there, and that Riverwalk and Shanda Park are just gems as far as we're concerned. Basically, I would not want to see a bridge over from Heron Park, and my reasoning is simply that I feel pretty secure and safe there, and many of us right there on the riverside keep our windows open if we're gone at night, etc. I don't know that I would feel quite as safe, and I'm not saying that that's the reason to not build one, but our preference, I know, would be not to have a bridge over.
Thank you for
Can I
saying
get
that.
what's your name?
Iris,
Iris?
I-R-I-S,
Gary.
Atkins, A-T-K-I-N-S. And as long as I'm here, can I just ask for something else? The area between,
Sorry to interrupt you. Can I actually ask you to come to the microphone? Because I think we
Sure,
are technically
sure.
televised now, which I assume
so sorry,
they
so,
won't hear very
and I don't know if it's appropriate to ask about this now, but, the area between Rivermore Landing and Shanda Park, behind some other condos, I just learned that it's really the town who owns that little bit of sidewalk. I was coming home from a volunteer meeting at the pantry, and coming back with a neighbor, and I was gonna walk the sidewalk there, and realized that it wasn't shoveled. It was full of ice and dangerous to walk on. So the neighbor I was walking with said, and I was just about to put my foot over the chain that separates near the kayaks by Rivermore Landing, and my foot was just on top of the chain, and Chris said to me, "Take my hand." And as I looked at her, I took my eyes off my boot, and I fell, got caught under the chain, broke my nose, had head CT, face CT, x-rays of my wrist and knees, etc. I am so fortunate that it was basically just a lot of bruises and a broken nose, and I realized I was trespassing. But is it the responsibility of the town to keep that little sidewalk area by the river shoveled?
Do you want me to-
That's my basic
You made
question.
out the most.
So that is not actually town property. The town does have a public access easement over that property.
Okay.
The previous owner of 13 Water Street is where the engineering firm is, and now the apartments used to be a restaurant. And that owner sold the town or gave the town an easement in trade for a bunch of improvements, and the town did a bunch of improvements. Some I don't remember the number, but it was tens of thousands of dollars, like $50,000 roughly, of improvements to that
Okay.
little public walkway. But it's just a public access easement on private property.
Is it anyone's responsibility to keep that shoveled?
No.
No,
No,
okay.
Yeah, unfortunately. And that is the downside. It does get very icy, and then people walk there, and then it gets packed down and gets icy.
Okay,
So it's even,
yeah. I
Well,
had no clue that
dangerous.
there would still be ice and snow there, because when
Yeah.
the lots were all cleared, and when I fell, it was straight onto gravel.
Yeah.
So coming back there, I fully expected to be able to walk the sidewalk, but,
yeah.
okay, I've had my question
Thank
answered.
you.
Thank you.
No, thank you for sharing. So yeah, I mean, that's some of the concern or difficulty is that there's a lot of competing ownership ownership and easement stakes down there. And I think at least on the public side, the land that the town has control over, that's something that we see as a goal, is trying to better coordinate all the departments and committees and commissions that care about Chanda Park to make sure that there's a clear picture of who's doing what. Sounds like that one unfortunately is technically the private landowner.
Yeah.
So-
There's another hand in the air out in the public.
I am aware of this, so can I have another opportunity to speak real quick?
Sure.
So, one of the things.
Can you go to the microphone?
So
They put us on TV
I-
now,
that's
so now I
okay.
need to ask
That's
people to
all
do.
right. So do I have to say my name? Betsy Wolf.
Sure.
So some of the conversation that you've already had in regards to the restrooms, again, do you feel like there's a need to poll people to see whether they're actually needed and the times of the year that they're needed? I like the idea of, renting something at first, because whomever owns it will then be responsible for the maintenance of it. So I think that's, kind of an advantage for the town to consider. And there's also possibility, and I don't know if anyone has even thought to reach out to the church and see if the church would open up their building for the use of restrooms during the nights that the arts and parks are occurring, and then maybe the town could give a donation to the church in order to help cover their janitorial fees. The other thing too, I just want to expand on what Joe's thought was about Moonlight Path. I mean Moonlight Brook. We know that area in Shanda Park is very small. We're really just very landlocked in that area. And 20 minutes before you had spoke about putting some sort of there was discussion about putting a bridge over Moonlight Brook. Would it be feasible to expand that bridge to be more like a deck, like you were just talking? Something that would be wider, that would expand the amount of space, usable space there. You can envision lights, along the railings or something to be used at nighttime, maybe another place to put a Christmas tree or holiday lights, or, and then keeping the spacing in between the planks so that sunlight can still get down. That's a thought as well. And I'm guessing too, at the very beginning, we talked about, there was discussion about the Moonlight Brook, and that you're waiting for engineering to see where the issues might be coming from, like where is all that bacterial counting come from? Is it coming from failed leach fields? Is it coming from issues with our sewer lines? I do know, being on Rivermore, and I was down at the Shanda Park boat launch the other day, there was a very strong smell of effluent. I don't know if that is part of that normal whole sewer process as the line's coming through, but I do know that we have had neighbors also smell that frequently during the summer months. So I don't know if that's part of the process. We do have a sewer line running through our back. So I don't know if anyone's taken a look into see whether there could be failures there and if that's contributing to the bacteria.
So the town is very much looking at that. So the bacteriological study actually grew out of a larger look at the entire Lamprey River watershed. So they sampled sites in Raymond all the way over to here, and there wasn't anything terribly abnormal found, with the exception of the Moonlight Brook outfall. So the problem basically seems to be occurring somewhere in Moonlight Brook. This year's phase of that will be where, and can it be identified as to what? Because when you don't have an immediately obvious point source, it gets a little bit more difficult.
So then just one other comment too, that water is stagnant. And it is still. And my background is actually clinical laboratory sciences, so I did diagnostic testing, specifically microbiology. So when human specimens would come to the hospital lab for testing, that's my background. And bacteria, including the coliforms, E. coli, enterococci, usually reproduce logarithmically every 20 minutes. So what starts out as one bacterial cell goes to 2, goes to 4, goes to 8, goes to 16, goes to 32. So again, I would like to think that that is all being taken into consideration, that the water sits there for a long period of time. Other sites may have had water flowing more freely. So if the culverts are repaired and water is apt to run more freely, will that help alleviate
We have
some of
had that,
problem?
we have had that conversation. So
Yeah,
that's one
so-
advantage because the culverts are partially blocked, it is
They are.
stagnant in there, and
Yeah.
we've recognized that,
Okay.
and it's, in a sense, a way, I think it's kind of almost, the momentum, let's say, and this is a decision that's kind of, I don't think it's really a vote, but over the last year, the momentum has certainly been, and Lindsay, the town engineer, is working on that, looking at grants and stuff like that.
Good.
It's a big project to get, permitting anything to do
Absolutely.
that kind of thing, so it becomes, so I think that's something that has some momentum behind it,
Yeah.
that part of the thing. And,
And then to Joe, you had spoken something about like filling in that area. Yeah.
Well, then I'd say fill it in, if they could pipe it, or whatever, and then, rocks or whatever, so the water
Yeah.
does in fact flow or whatever,
Yeah.
and then cap it.
Yeah, yeah, I mean,
But
the
again,
permitting
it's-
again for that would be so challenging. So,
It's
but-
not it's not a huge area, I don't
Yeah.
think.
And if it would help with the bacterial counts, that would definitely be,
If
improve the water quality, that would be an advantage. Thank you.
I'll just add, yeah, I would definitely say that in the chart thing that we do, the questionnaire, whatever, definitely one of the things should be, would you find public restrooms helpful, or, in the area, and, when do you think you would use them,
Well,
type
and
of thing.
even turning it so that how long, when you were at Shanda Park, how long of time do you spend there? So in other words, so that way, because otherwise, if you say if there are bathrooms there, that's a lead on that said, absolutely, yes, I'll use it. But if you phrase it in that, when you use Shanda Park, how long are you there for? And then what activities are you there for? And then you can kind of determine whether, well, if they're gonna be there for 2 hours in the evening, they've just, come from dinner, they're probably gonna need a restroom, So just some ideas on that.
Okay, but definitely, something needs to be, I
Yeah,
would definitely
yeah.
say that's a good question for the general report.
Yeah, people coming off their kayaks too. So,
And
yeah.
the other, kudos that I'll throw to the town is on the wastewater side. They are currently doing a project to CCTV, basically run a camera through an absurd amount of the overall quantity of the sewer pipes, basically looking for the exact thing that you're describing.
Okay, great.
Is there an obvious leak in the area that could be contributing?
Yeah,
Because there are quite a few adjacent to this area.
yeah,
well, and like the conversation I had once long ago with Sean was about, a lot of this goes back to the time when, when they, what was it, 90s, when they had to separate, when they did the project to separate sewer they separated the stormwater from the sewer lines.
yes,
And that was a fairly arduous process, and, a lot of digging, but, I think sometimes it wasn't 100% clear. These lines were kind of murky in terms of, so.
Yeah, I was amazed when I was on the school board. They had to run those cameras through the pipes underneath the elementary school because when that was built, they didn't separate out the kitchen sewage from the rest of the sewage, and it plugged right about halfway down the elementary school.
Need a grease trap for that reason. Yeah, fat, oil, and grease are not good
Yeah.
for sewer connections.
Fog.
Yep.
Well, and that's a serious concern in any town that has restaurants. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. So I don't need to put people kind of on the spot with any of this, but this is something I'd like kind of people to, I guess, consider a little bit of just, all right, what is of interest? I think something like Moonlight Brook we've talked about a lot, and frankly, we may be approaching within the next couple months an inflection point where the town basically takes this on in its entirety anyway. It might outgrow us relatively soon, except with its coordination between Shanda Park and all that. But just if there's elements of the topics that have come up in this committee that get you excited and you want to play a larger role in, just think about that. 'Cause
Yeah.
I think that the division of work thing is something that will help us accomplish a little bit more. If people say, all right, these one or two things get me excited, like I'll kind of pull the thread on this and see what else we can get.
Yeah, because I think part of this is, I'm interested in just how we, a lot of this, we come up against something that we can talk among ourselves, but at some point we have to, have people from the town, Steve saying, yes, we could approach Elaine Cheney, yes, we could do this. What has to happen to know, because I think we've had quite a bit of conversation about it, and somebody has to find out.
Yeah.
What would it take,
It's time.
what is the real feasibility of it? And what do
I
we
fully
need to
agree.
do that, so that we can then we can have something we can present it to Charette to say, this looks really hard to do, this looks impossible, this could be done, this is about a really wide confidence, what would it cost to do that, so people thought, if we could get some more informed guesstimates about some of those questions, that would really it would help us move forward as a committee as well as help us prepare for the charrette, because that's not that far away.
It's not, and I think the timing is right, and I think that's something I kind of have stated a couple times, but I think all of you have a lot of experience on town committees, probably frankly more than I do. So I'd like to kind of lean on all you and the people you know and the things that you're interested in, your areas of expertise and all that, and do that, because I think we've talked enough. I think it's time to force some action and see if anything is gonna proceed further or not. And kind of this period of time between now and when that charrette happens to pull the public at large about it is sort of the time to force that.
Well, quickly looking at this, I'd be willing to toss my name into the Riverwalk, whatever subcommittee, and general maintenance, weir storage, and boat launch. The ones that kind of, I feel that I could do some good on.
Is the parking area tied to the boat launch? I don't know the answer to that question, but they always seem to get discussed in the same.
And I wish I could read the plaque that's down there. So there's those 4 entities that donated money to buy the house that was where the parking area is. And that created the area for Shanda Park. And one of them was like Trout Unlimited or something like that. And they gave money with the understanding that it would be the trailer spaces for boats with trailers. So it was just, they gave money towards this endeavor. And I don't know if it was the boat, well, the boat was a Fish and Game, and Fish and Game has pretty much said they're not gonna do anything with it because they've got higher priorities. And we turned them down on the concrete piers, concrete bar one 20 years ago, and they've pretty much walked away from Newmarket now, saying they've got a lot of other places we need to put our efforts.
Yeah.
And they count that one that's down by Public Works as another boat launch, which, take a look at that, I don't know how you launch a boat other than a kayak. Just,
Well, so do we, is there anything we need to talk to Fish and Game about? Because I was under the impression that if we ever were going to do something there, we would need to engage Fish and Game.
you probably do. I think it is a Fish and Game boat ramp. They're just not gonna invest any more money in it. They're just not going to, they walked, because they wanted to narrow it, like 20 years ago, they wanted to narrow it and put concrete bars down. And there was a Heritage Commission in town at the time, and Heritage Commission kind of said, no way, we don't want that to happen, it's a historic, those granite blocks are historic, and we don't want it just the way it is. And so Fish and Game said, okay, fine, and they just didn't do it, and they said, oh, we're not going to do it.
So then, is there anybody that speaks, is the Heritage Commission, is that even active anymore?
It got disbanded.
Right. And is there any constituency about, I mean, we've talked about some of the walls would have to be repaired or done something to because of the whole living shoreline.
Well, just because they're unsafe and unstable right now, we've got
right.
the construction fence around some of it.
Right. I'd be very interested, I use the boat landing, so I'd be happy to have, sit down with coffee with you.
Yeah.
And just chit chat about what do we need to do to answer those questions, because I think if we can do something concrete on some of these questions, then we can try to figure out who do we need to talk to have some sense of what's possible.
Yeah, yeah, we definitely, we have to get a contact with Fish and Game, see what their concerns are, and if they would have a problem. I don't think they'd have a problem with us improving it, but it's important to find out.
Well, what's the gal's name? I've talked to her
Fish and-
sometimes.
She's, when you say it all over,
I think she's head of Fish and Game now. I'll find out. I'm gonna be,
Amy?
no, but I know who the person is. And I could figure out who to talk to pretty quickly
yeah,
on that.
I'd be glad to meet down anytime. Tomorrow morning would be fine by me.
Yeah, so that's fine. I mean, like I had mentioned, I think just, especially sitting on Concom as well, the general maintenance and kind of creating some sort of just blueprint so that there's more clear definition between who's doing what, all that down there. That's something I'm happy to take on. And then the living shoreline stuff, I think we're all interested in. But I also find that proving out that is feasible or not feasible is sort of a pet project of mine as well.
Yeah, I think it would be, Mike, and we don't run afoul of the, and of course, Mike's not a voting member anyway, so maybe Joe, since you're on the council, Mike, Joe, and I could kind of try to hold some conversation with people within the town without bringing it into one of our meetings right now, just so that we can get some feedback on how we could move this forward and what we would do, and then bring that back to the committee as action items.
They're really just Bart, start off with Bart and Lindsay? Wouldn't-
I don't think that's where I don't think Bart and Lindsay would be.
Yeah, I wouldn't even take their time up in the beginning, just because we don't really know where they are. But, certainly getting them on the side at some point is valuable, but in the very beginning, we don't even know where we're going.
Right, I don't know. I think Steve has indicated in the past the idea of going back to the whole UNH thing. Broadly speaking, he was supportive of this.
Every time you show up here, the 3 or 4 times we've talked to him since this committee started, he always reiterates that at a conceptual level, he supports these items.
Right.
So, okay,
So
here's the specifics. Start saying, here's some of the specific things. Is there support for these? Is there gonna be, town backing for them or not?
Right.
What do you need to know?
I think, I certainly am fine with putting the bridge towards the back end of all of this. Not to say I'm giving up on the idea, I think it's something the charrette can discuss, but I'm not disagreeing with you what your concerns are either. I'm just saying, I'm trying to find a way to move the other items, make more progress on some of the things that everybody agrees on.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
the other,
That's wise.
other things can be kind of understood, the charrette will let people, we can put those among the things that have been what we've discussed, where we are, which is not very far ahead on that. That would be something you could present at a charrette.
Yeah.
But the things that are real close to Shanda Park, it's sort of the epicenter, boat landing, riverwalk, restrooms, those things we need to figure out. What's possible, what's not, how do we find out? And
Yeah, I think, even maybe more so than a bridge. The bridge was always the concept that got discussed, but the heart of that issue was always improving accessibility to Heron Point, improving access of Heron Point, of being a town-owned, 30-acre parcel that's right downtown, right on the river, but separated by the river, and the only access being the revocable easement through the mobile home park. And providing a better, more established, more clear access for that. So obviously the straightest distance between 2 points is a straight line, hence a bridge, but it's not the only way to achieve that objective.
I'm in a sense, for people that are liking to walk around there, the access was improved by the sidewalk.
It was, and at the time that we started this conversation, there wasn't a sidewalk on Bay Road.
Right, so
which
that,
was a little bit of a health hazard, especially as you got up to 108.
right, so to our point, conversations earlier, it may at the time of the charrette, up, you know, when I think I'll do a walk with Mike here, if that's the easiest thing to schedule. But to do that walk over, you know, on the other town line, on this side, and just sort of, you know, think about some of the, what are the low-hanging fruit of things that could be done?
Yeah, and I mean, I know I've plugged this before too, but Conservation Commission spent a lot of time last year with basically improving the trails over at Heron Point and doing some work from the wood platform to the parking area and things like that. So it's something we've recently invested in and we want more people to use.
Right. And is the parking there working out fine? They've put a gate on the parking. Is there, at this point, is it,
At this point, it hasn't been a problem recently.
yeah,
Very much was so a couple of years ago.
yeah. So I think that the easier way of creating more usage of Heron Point is, you know, with maps and the websites and stuff like that increase awareness of it, because it's a nice, I mean, I know I've been on it in the last few months, it's a nice place to go, but
On the boat launch, I was kinda, you and Mike wanna get together and just say, okay, first of all, you know, what is it that we actually really wanna do? Take a look at it, you know, and then from there figure out, okay, let's talk to, I don't know, you wanna talk to Rick or, you know, who
Start
on
with
the town
Steve,
side?
because, you know, Rick has to do what he's told to some degree.
So, it's Steve,
And Steve, and then really the council, I mean, Steve reports to the council too, so it's always,
but I can bring anything to the council, I gotta know what you wanna bring to them.
do you want
and say,
to meet at noon tomorrow down at Shanda Park?
Tomorrow, yeah, I
You
can do that.
mentioned coffee, coffee's okay at noon, right?
you know, do coffee, lunch, whatever we wanna do.
Yeah, noon at Shanda Park, and
Okay.
that's, we're not a,
I wanna go. Less desirable
You have to
tasks
work.
to take care of.
the retired folk will handle this.
Well, I think we need to come up with some concrete.
I wasn't gonna
next-
say it, but I'm also extremely happy, and that's part of the reason, is because I know you guys, again, you know like everybody, and you have more time than I've seen. And
Well, I think you've done more.
you guys,
But the organization is huge, this
Yeah,
document is
this is
fantastic.
incredible. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's extremely helpful, I think.
yeah. I think we've gotta start actually having planning outputs from our meeting. So-
Yeah,
So when we, the three of us, have a conversation about this, we'll write these things down, and I'll work on the document when we come up with it, and create a document from that, so that, you know, we can have things that either Steve needs to come to a meeting, or we can have enough conversation with Steve to say, these are the things, how do you endorse these are the steps? Can we do these things? Can we?
Steve's always money-centric. If it costs money, we didn't budget for it, it's not happening right now. He wants to budget for it, you know, he just doesn't want, you know, he doesn't want the curveballs.
Well, I think you, in order to budget for something, you've got to get your plans to a certain
Yeah,
level.
yeah.
You have to develop
Exactly.
things
Yeah.
before you
Yeah.
can really,
Sure.
he's always indicating, you know, if you guys get it together, figure
Right.
it out, I'm open to putting it
Yeah.
in the budget. And
But
I think
exactly, he's gonna want it in the CIP
Yeah.
and to plan for it and.
Right, because there's a lot of money that's budgeted, but until you figure it out, that's why the
Yeah.
government always asks for shovel-ready project.
And the
Figure
pub-
it out, and then.
Yeah, and then the public input, process is so important.
Right.
Start going down a path and all of a sudden find out that everybody hates it.
Right, right. I mean, I think that's why we've got to make good use of the next few months, because we're getting a grant. A lot of effort's gonna go in by Bart to have this charrette come off. We really, it's not gonna work that well unless we've done the sort of pre-work to get us there.
The one thing I'm going to do, and I think we probably should all do, is before we meet tomorrow, is just look at that UNH plan that they had, because they had some ideas. And I just want to refresh my memory. on
That's a
it,
good
'cause
plan.
They
That's a
did
good idea.
something on the boat dock. Yeah.
Can-
Is the public hearing portion closed? Does it have to be closed, or there's a hand in the audience? I don't know if we close it or reopen it, or kind of keep it informal.
I think I know the rules.
We can make our own, as a committee, we can make our own rules, so.
Yeah,
Fine, yeah.
we're advisory. Nobody sues us.
Yeah, my perspective on everything for for work too. Is I
Mr.
always
Chair,
keep-
somebody wants to make a comment?
Quick question, I'm not sure what the word charrette is, means, and you've used it several times.
Yeah, it's a fancy meeting. Basically, the concept of a charrette is you get people together, stakeholders. So anyone who has an interest, abutting property owners, an advisory committee, representative from the town council, the town planner, and then for this one specifically, Bart, the town planner, has done a lot of work trying to kind of leverage a grant to do this plan, New Hampshire charrette for specifically kind of the waterfront and downtown access and things like that. But it'll be administered, by people with planning backgrounds who know how to kind of engage that conversation.
Very good, thank you.
It's a wicked big meeting, like there'll be 30 to 60 people, usually downstairs, and they go from table to table. And everybody gets a voice, and it kind of figures out the overarching consensus of the community.
Consensus, okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
Do you have a clue when another one might be?
It's going to be this
Oh.
fall is going to be
Oh,
the
okay.
event. So it's been talked about for a while, but has not been scheduled
Okay.
yet. But should be formally happening this fall.
Okay.
We had one in the town, there was some, did they call it a charrette? This was back when people were trying to figure out the school situation, I think it was, and they had one where we were having these contentious town meetings and everything else, and they had one back then, I remember going to it. And people would be talking about potential solutions, and it got a lot of people in the same room talking. And I think part of the genesis, and this is something Bart really, brought an interest in doing it with him, and he has a lot of experience as a planner. But, our interest is we recognize at some point that even though we've talked a lot about the different things that might happen down there, our sense is that the town as a whole is not engaged much in that conversation. So you'd like to bring in more. I'm glad you guys are here. It's great to have you here to be engaging in the conversation. When you get a few people together and you say, what do you think about this? And people will say, well, that sounds great, or I don't know about, the bridge. I mean, I've gotten both sides on the bridge for sure, but we haven't done anything really formal yet to broaden the conversation. This is our attempt to do that.
Great.
Thank you.
So I don't have anything else. The primary objective is just to kind of talk conceptually about, how to bring it up, because I think that's the thing. I think we've done an excellent job kind of talking through these areas and kicking the tires, but I think it's that point where can we force any outcomes? Is something going to work? What do we want to focus on for discussion items? Come to charrette, items like that. So, the flip side of your coin, Steve, is as someone who designs things for a living, that I always get a little annoyed because you do need to invest to come up with good ideas, which has kind of been the stymie. But I think specifically a lot of my bones to pick with that have been on the living shoreline concept, which we were lucky enough to kind of get through a grant, and then has been on Moonlight Brook, which Lindsay is obviously kind of fully engaged at this point, and there seems to be a clear path forward for how that one will go. So I think that is starting to happen. Of those two items that really need professional input have received that at this time.
Yeah, we're fortunate to now have a town engineer, because that was a real big
Yes.
missing piece for this town.
I have a question on Bart's thing here. So, the grant, so what are we doing? I mean, the timelines are very, very short here. So, are we going to do anything with this?
I don't believe we have to. So my understanding is now at this point, it's kind of in other people's hands. We've done our job. We've explained the issues. People have bought into that concept and agreed with it. So the two shortest timeline ones are the coastal resilience grant, and if the town wants to put in for loan funds through the Clean Water SRF, or there may even be a separate grant. Yeah, but the Clean Water SRF planning aspect and the coastal resilience are both about 6 weeks out.
Well, there's one here, April, the River Estuaries Partnership there.
Which one is that?
The second one, the Piscataqua River Estuaries Partnership one,
Oh, gotcha. It's,
the development of the Riverfront Master Plan.
yeah, I think that one may be rolling more than hard deadline. I
That-
know it says 28th, but
It says April 28th, yeah.
I
Okay,
can
so,
follow up with Bart on that one.
okay, so the bottom line is this is kind of like in Bart's hands in the.
Yeah, Stratford County Regional Planning is helping with the Coastal Resilience Grant, and the Clean Water SRF will be fronted by Lindsay, so at this point, I think it's leading our nest.
Okay.
The
Right.
town is kind of taking that on with just a little bit of, assistance and checking the facts with us.
I think if we move forward on the things we just talked about, in terms of seeing what are the obstacles to having a clearer understanding of,
Yeah.
that would be a big step. That would help us a lot as a committee.
So my last thought is, I'm kind of a technical dunce, but I work with some smart people. So I may have someone turn this into a OneDrive document so that anyone can edit it, because we'll learn more, and then that way it's not just sitting on my computer.
Okay.
So that seems to have some value.
Is OneDrive, is that Microsoft?
Microsoft, yeah,
you know.
sharing, yeah. So he just
Or
can give permission to
Even a
different people.
Google Doc or whatever. OneDrive is just what, again, my term.
OneDrive's better than Google Doc to me.
I kind of think so. I know we do a lot of our professional reporting through OneDrive, but
Yeah, and I can accommodate that, that's fine.
yeah. So just setting up in some shared capacity, and probably even give access to Lindsay and Bart as well. Just because there will be more things learned, and if someone figures something out of value, just type it in.
Sure.
So I'll see if I can get that set up in a way that's usable to other people.
Yeah, and that would mean like if I try to consolidate what, Mike and I and Joe learned into a document, then somehow that can be integrated into the master document at that time, so it's.
Alright. Anything else that's on anyone's minds to discuss? I think per our usual schedule, May 15th. May 15th would be the next one.
And this, that site walk we were talking about, what's the potential date on that?
Well, we could actually, sometimes people do it right before a meeting. We could, if you want, we can do it right before the meeting and then end up here. I mean, that's the way the ZBA often runs it,
That would be a good idea.
that way.
Would work for me.
Yeah, we could do it at 3
Yeah,
and then come back up here for 4.
yep.
Alright.
And where would we meet? Down at the pump, the waste treatment plant?
Shanda Park.
Yeah,
lot?
well, on this one, well, we could do Shanda Park. We'd have to walk up Colonial Drive, but that's not that bad.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's pleasant. Why not Shanda Park?
okay, that's
Will
fine.
there be parking?
Yeah,
Might just
with
be
three-
here
We
in a
can
long
figure it
time.
out. We
3 o'clock
all
on a
know,
Monday.
we know secret parking spots.
People.
Just bring your boat trailer, you'll be fine.
Yeah, we'll post it for 3 p.m. sidewalk.
Mike?
Shanda Park.
Okay.
How does that sound?
That sounds good.
Okay.
Let me put that on the calendar right now, so I don't just immediately forget everything that we just said.
Monday, May 15th, but now that one's gonna be at 3 o'clock.
Did you, I do have a question. Did you send the Ingrid's note to? Not Ingrid, Gretchen's note, to Wendy. You told me that Gretchen had sent you a note one time that she was gonna.
Just the email, and shockingly, no. Let me do that before I.
If you could send that to Wendy and say, here's her resignation, and then you have an opening.
And I have to send you an article, I'm looking at from the Boston Globe. I'll send that to you. I think you'll find it interesting.
See.
So did anybody, what happened with the thing with Benjamin Buckley? Is that somebody that is going to join the committee, or?
Not this committee, he's
Yeah, it was
looking
for a
to,
different committee.
It was just a mix-up, went to the wrong committee.
yeah, that's correct, he's, the Lamprey River, it's,
Advisory committee.
which is different than
Oh,
Riverfront.
They go upstream. We're downstream from those guys. Although our mission doesn't really identify where our geographical boundaries are, but,
The
we've
Riverfront
kind of
and
just
Newmarket
figured
and-
we'd stay below the dam.
Oh, I think we got
We've got enough to do.
making any, like, slow progress on any of our.
Yeah,
these
no,
are
that's
big
enough.
items, You know,
Our mouth is full.
yeah, but.
Well,
Well, if there's no
Motion to adjourn.
further ado, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
I'll second. Ingrid second. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for the ability to listen and to speak.
public